So we got this routine in my house that I absolutely love. I treasure it. I've got these 3 kids, and I'm crazy about them. I'm invested in them. I love watching them become all the things that they're becoming. I love watching their minds flower. I love watching them understand story better. And I think story is really important. So I'm very invested in that. And I put a lot of energy into trying to help them break down the individual elements of story. And not just to think through, like, what do you think so-and-so is going to do next, but think through, why is the author saying it this way? What would be the natural place for this story to go next? Where do we detect the twists? And I got a couple of reasons for that. One is I want them to understand the Bible better, and there's a ton of story in the Bible. 2, I want them to understand human nature better, and good storytelling forces you to gain insight or work on your insight skills into understanding how we're wired as human beings. And 3, I want them to see the beauty of this most human of art forms. You think about it. Music, movies, poetry, visual art, everything that humans create is in one way or another overtly a story or is rooted in story. So if you're good at story and you're intentional in practicing it, you're going to be able to decode the matrix of all of human existence way better. And I want them to have that skill set, and working with them causes me to grow in the skill set. So I told you there's this thing that we do. The ritual that we do is we sit down in one of the kids' bedrooms each night and we read just some chapters of some story. Usually the story is pretty innocuous. Right now we're processing through the Ranger's Apprentice series by John Flanagan. And it's fun even to watch John Flanagan improve as an author from book to book. Early on, I was like, oh, this is pretty clunky, but I like what you're trying to do. Now I'm like, hey, like this book that we just started, man, that was a great opening chapter. It was legitimately very well done. And so my kids are seeing this author improve as well. And my kids are themselves getting way better at noticing themes, noticing repetition, noticing patterns, becoming familiar with the characters and thinking in terms of their motivations and seeing where it's going to go. And so a couple of nights ago, we're wrapping up one book as we get to this very cliffhanger-y ending. And my little boy was like, I'm kind of nervous. And you could tell that he was really tensioned up over the fate that the heroes were facing. And my daughter, my middle kid, was like, I don't know. I'm not that worried, because it seems like there are all these problems they get into, but the way the story is written, the kind of story it is, you can always anticipate how they're going to work it out and what they're going to learn to get out of the difficult situation. And so I'm just excited to see what they figure out. And so she felt all of this optimism, whereas the little boy, maybe despair is too strong a word, but he felt something akin to despair. Likewise, when you are reading the parables in the context of the larger New Testament, the story of the Bible, the human story in general, when you look at these little chunks and these little pieces of history or even of Bible, you can feel, I think, hints of despair, like, oh no, things might be difficult at times. In the case of the kingdom parables, you might look at the content in Matthew chapter 13 that talks about 3 of the 4 types of soil that receive the seed that the sower just scatters out there, not working out. And you could feel despair, like that's so much not working out. You could look at the parable of the wheat and the weeds and go, oh no, look what happened to that beautiful field. That's going to be so hard to sort out. I feel despair. You could even look at these little micro parables of the mustard seed and the yeast that we've been working on for the last couple of days and feel despair at just the impossibility of this little thing growing into anything that could be sustaining or lasting, let alone world-changing. But much like my very intuitive daughter has paid attention to the beats of the stories we've been reading and is able to say, no, this is a setup. Like what we're going to see here is the twist. We're going to see them figure it out. So as we get more used to the storytelling beats of the Gospel of Matthew, we should be starting to recognize that all of these parables might be fraught with peril or difficulty, but that the master in the parables, the God character in the parables, always has this bigger view, this longer view that implicitly in the very act of telling a parable, he is inviting us into. I want to talk about with somebody who hears these parables, either the original audience, the first readers of Matthew, you and me today. I want to talk about what somebody who thinks there's maybe a God behind this whole thing can take from these 2 little descriptions of the kingdom. And so I have made a list. The list begins thusly. Thing number one, I think the reader of these parables is supposed to come away feeling, take heart. Yep, the mustard seed is very small right now. Yep, the yeast is a very tiny thing. You almost can't even see it. Yep, the world is a difficult place. Yep, people are going crazy and doing stupid stuff. But take heart, because there is something bigger than us. There's something bigger than human action. There's something bigger to this narrative. And that bigger character is on it. The field might seem untended, but it's tended. That seed might seem really small, but it contains the data packet of the truest, realist thing ever. Just give it a minute. So thing number one that I think is very natural for the readers of these parables to take from them is take heart. Thing number two, kind of combined with take heart, but I'm going to make it thing number two anyway, long view. The reader of the parable is implicitly invited to imitate the perspective of the master, rather than fixating on the peril of the moment. That is, we've got this little fledgling seed that is maybe just starting to sprout up, but it's still so vulnerable, and I don't know if that thing's going to work out. Instead, you can imitate the patience of the master. It's like, no, you know how seeds work. Give this thing a minute, and something amazing is going to come out of something very small and unassuming. I don't know how that little tiny bit of yeast is going to work for that whole big glob of dough. Give it a minute. It's going to manifest in a way that will be much bigger than what you would anticipate. The experienced, wise, old, sage master character, whether explicitly or implicitly in all of these parables, sees the long view, and it colors the way he thinks about people and current events and crises and the stuff that causes people to imagine that their hair is just on fire and we got to rip things up and do crazy stuff right now. No. Long view. Very much flowing out of thing number one, take heart, and thing number two, long view, that I think the reader of these little micro parables of the mustard seed and the yeast can take from it, is thing number three, which is you don't have to get caught up and tangled up in the moment because the master isn't caught up and tangled up in the moment. The master is keenly aware in the parable of the wheat and the weeds that there's a problem, and then the master has a plan to address it. Now, the master is not explicitly named in the parable of the mustard seed or the yeast, but the character is still there quietly behind the stories. The mistaken way to look at the plight of the mustard seed and the yeast is with despair, saying, I can't imagine how that's ever going to work out. But the one who has ears to hear and understands these two parables looks at those things and is like, yeah, it's going to work out. And the moment is not the only thing here. There's something much bigger going on. So as weird as it seems for me to read these two little micro parables and be like, yeah, I think this is just one more reminder of how Jesus didn't get caught up in every frantic moment du jour. He wasn't pressing the panic button every time something went wrong. He was on course toward one thing, the glory of his Father. And the glory of his Father is achieved by Jesus doing what he's supposed to do and making this kingdom thing a reality. And through 13 chapters, we just don't see him deviating from that in his actions or his teachings at all. Everything is run through this filter, through this prism, or through these lenses, is probably the best way to say it, of the kingdom and the glory of the Father. And again, part of the beauty of these little parables here in Matthew 13 is that we are being implicitly given permission to imitate the mentality of the master who has this longer view, who has this singleness of heart, who has this focus, who has this ability not to get caught up in the panic of the moment or the panic of how things might seem, but instead to stick to the values of the kingdom and see the thing through. So in light of that, the fourth thing I would add to the list, along with and in keeping with take heart, long view, no need to get tangled up frantically in the moment or panic, would be a quiet optimism and confidence rooted in hope. The master is looking ahead in these situations and seeing the potential of these investments, seeing the potential of what it looks like as the kingdom grows and flowers into something. The master is not looking at the hyperbolic politics of the day or the yelling or the internet situation of the day. The master is well aware of those things, understands the problem, but much more so there is, with that singularity we talked about in point 3, there's confidence that this thing will work out. Now, why would anybody reading Matthew 13 have confidence that stuff is going somewhere, that history is moving in a direction, when all the history they see in front of their faces is the Jewish people getting kicked around, their people getting kicked around and abused by the Assyrians, by the Babylonians, by the Persians a little bit, by the Greeks, by the Romans. Everybody comes and beats on us. Where's our God? These are political problems that must have political solutions. We need to stand in here and fight, and if they get ugly, we might just have to get ugly too for the greater good. That's how I would be feeling probably if I were in their shoes. But Jesus offers this contrast in these parables and in everything that comes before these parables and in everything that comes after these parables. And maybe the point of contrast that stands out the most to me with these stories versus what we're dealing with in the world these days is I would characterize the world right now as being fraught with franticness and everybody feeling like whatever's going on at any given moment from whatever side you happen to look at things, that's the most important, urgent thing ever. You contrast that with the master, how he lives, how he teaches, the miraculous stuff he's done, what he says here, and there's just this cool confidence. And I asked a second ago, how can you be so sure? Well, look at what he's done. I mean, he teaches as one who has authority. He teaches not as one shrieking into the void of the internet about their angry opinions about how the things ought to be and how bad everybody else is. You don't hear that. And beyond the way he uses his words authoritatively, we also see his actions being far more authoritative than anything we've ever seen from anyone ever. He bends reality to his power and to his will. He breaks the laws of time and space. So if some internet talking head or cable news talking head or politician or celebrity comes along and is like, this is how the things are. Okay, that's cool. That's your opinion. And I guess that's probably how you wish the things were or what you're using force to try to make the things into. But the confidence we see from Jesus throughout the Gospel of Matthew, from the master in these parables, is born out of his absolute authority over all of existence and all of history, and it's born out of the clarity, the unflinching clarity that he has on how this thing is going to play out and where the whole thing is going. And part of what I think is implicitly beautiful about all of the parables in Matthew chapter 13, including these two little micro parables of the mustard seed and the yeast, is that the reader is explicitly and implicitly invited into that confidence, is invited to share in that clarity and that hope and that confidence and that sense of peace that goes beyond any reasonable understanding that they are able to feel in the midst of crazy things and chaos. Thanks again to everybody who jumped in this week to support the program at patreon.com/the TMBH That means a lot. It's a big encouragement to me. I'm having fun putting this thing together. I think you're going to really like this little field notes thing that has the TMBH logo and the book of Matthew on it that I'm sending to literally everybody who supports the program on Patreon, whether you've been doing it for a long time or you're brand new. Either way, here in a couple of weeks when these are printed up and ready to go, I'm just going to send you one of these to say thank you and maybe even to help organize your thoughts and give you somewhere fun to jot things down as you process through this material with me. I appreciate you all so much. Thanks for hanging out. I'm Matt. This is the 10 Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.